City Books release party. This is in part to introduce our anthology Bridges, but we also have all of our own material. For those of you who are watching this live stream, if you comment with either an emoji of a present or the word present, you will be entered into our contest to win 5 free ebooks, one of which is Bridges, the other of which you will hear selections from as we start reading. So please give us a comment. We'd love to hear from you. And I think we're about to get started. Our first author to read is B.T. Martinson.
Hello, I'm going to be reading from The Mad King's Trials. It's one of the books in the giveaway. I will be starting on chapter 2. So, this chapter is going to start off with Lord Faustus, one of the men of King Cyprianus, trying to find out the gods, and it's going to be Faustus and his sister Agrippa. You did what? Faustus bellowed. Agrippa flinched under the reprimand of her brother. He had the best intentions. She truly believed that. Just why did he have to be so mean about it? Agrippa took a breath to steel herself, stood up straight, but was holding on to the lace string of her dress. I bought a fortune from the eye of the gods. They said he would find the cause of the drought in Kingsway. Faustus used his fingers to brush his long black hair back. There is no such thing as an oracle. The eye of the gods is thought to be a myth. It only appears in random parts of the histories. Is it really so difficult to understand that those stories came after the fact that the events already happened? Well, that might be true, Agrippa said. Why does he have to make me feel so stupid all the time? The man was so convincing, though. All charlatans are, Faustus replied. He sighed. Where did you find him, and how much did you spend? A cold pit dropped into Agrippa's stomach and permeated her entire being. What are you going to do? I'm getting our money back, Faustus said. We need every coin at the moment. And stop drinking it all, Agrippa thought. Sure, the wineries kept their part of the country going. Their wine was now the most well-known export of Kingsway. It was one of the few unique things left about Kingsway. It made lots of money. Somehow, they still weren't making as much money as Lord Furniture, though. Where did you find him? Faustus asked again through gritted teeth. Agrippa shrank back. By the docks. His store was behind the captain's station and between the smithy and Taylor. Faustus squinted. What were you doing by the docks? I was shopping for paint supplies and books, Agrippa said. We need to find something for you to do, Faustus said. Agrippa gritted her teeth. I have nothing else to do. You keep me hidden away when we're at home in the manor. Are you really that ashamed of me? Her brother slumped back, the wolf pelts falling forward. I'm working on it. I'm not hiding you away. I haven't forgotten about you. I'll find a suitor for you. Then you expect me to wait? I have been waiting for years, she said, and got every syllable slower than the last. 5 years. It was an arrangement that they It was an argument that they have had a number of times now. They were new nobility. Agrippa had no formal education. Her father did well to teach her to read and write, but it wasn't much. He was busy working a clothing shop with a few exotic items he picked up from the merchants traveling through. She read only a handful of books. The nobility scoffed at her for reading fairy tales, but it was all that her family could afford. Everything about her and her family never seemed good enough for the noble peers. I've been busy, he claimed. Agrippa screamed. Promises broken and promised again, time and time again, with him while the best years of her life slipped by her. That's what you have been saying for 5 years. When are you ever not busy? When am I ever going to be a priority for you? You are a priority, he roared back. I don't want some sleazy noble marrying you for our lands and titles that we earned the hard way while he goes off and sleeps with other women. He stepped back and took a deep breath. As for now, I am going to find the charlatan who swindled you. It was the oracle. They claim to be the eye of the gods. Is it so hard to believe that we might be right? Agatha asked. We've been suffering from this for 7 years now. You'd think that we'd have found the answer by now if it lay in Kingsway, Fosta said in Marshall the manner. He has a point. Him, Aeolus, and Cyprianus have been trying to solve this for years. They spent fortunes on far-flung attempts to stop this drought. Why wouldn't they have found it if it were in Kingsway? Still, she didn't think he was right. She had to stop him. She took off down the hall after him. Emilia loaned them a few rooms in a gorgeous estate on the riverbank. She loved the paintings. She daydreamed that someone might ask for her work to be displayed in a place as nice as this someday. She did not have time for that now. She raced down the steps. How fast was he going? Out the foyer and into the street where Faustus's carriage was taking off. She slumped into the street as the carriage drove away. Agatha felt the tears swelling and her shoulders trembled. She said a prayer for the people her brother saw. She didn't want anyone to get hurt. She thought the oracle would be fun and exciting. Someone laid a hand on her shoulder. Please don't just leave. But the man gently cupped her chin in his hand and looked her in the eyes. He brushed away her hair, and then he saw what she tried to hide every day of her life. A web of scars that she hid behind her silky black hair. Everyone made one of two faces. Eyes wide, eyebrows up, the mouth agape in surprise. Though she didn't mind too much, but this man made the second face. Eyebrows and mouth turned down in disgust as he pulled their heads back. Sometimes it lasted only an instant, but some kept the look as they walked away. Did people not realize how much that look hurt, even when it was only for an instant? She wasn't very beautiful to begin with, but to add a web of scars on half of her face was a cruel fate. The man withdrew his help and interest and walked away. People nearby quickly turned their stares away and went about their business. Everybody is all about helping those who look pretty until they realize how damaged we are. Agatha watched the strangers go about their business while pointedly not paying her any more attention. I hope I'm not going. So I'll leave it there, and I will introduce our next reader, Janice Grundon, and it's up to you. Yes.
And the Mad King's Trials are now available for purchase.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this fantastic event to promote Bridges, the Mad King's Trials, and of course my book, Damaged Goods, a collection of short stories, available now. Today, I will be reading from Green is the Color, well, taken from Damaged Goods. I'm going to find it, bear with me. Always highly prepared. All right, here we go. I woke to a giant man who resembled a black refrigerator in a navy tracksuit standing over my bed. The monster's name was Biggs, and he worked for a local dealer named Sky. His job was to make sure nobody fucked with Sky. I had known Sky as Jeffrey Booker. We had issues several years ago, but I was under the impression that things were cool. We hadn't had any problems since, but there was Biggs, with a cup of gas station coffee in each hand. "Wake up, Buttercup," he said. "What's going on?" "Sky wants to see you," he said. Biggs led me to a shiny black Cadillac Escalade that looked really out of place in my shitty little neighborhood. He walked me to the back door and motioned for me to get in. I was surprised that Sky wasn't already in the vehicle waiting. "Where's Sky?" "I'm taking you to him." "Are you sure you're not going to just take me out somewhere and make me disappear?" "I'm taking you to the man." Fair enough. I still couldn't shake the feeling that Biggs was taking me for a long ride, never to be seen again. I felt a little better when we drove into town. I hadn't seen this guy in years, but he crossed my mind from time to time. He had a face you couldn't forget. This guy looked like every picture of Jesus I had ever seen, dressed like a 70s pimp. He had long hair, a full beard, and kind eyes. He also had a thing for polyester and gaudy gold jewelry. He was just a little different, and he handled his business a little differently also. As we pulled into the Taco Bell, I could see Sky's 88 Delta. It looked like Sky if he were a car. It was decked out in various animal print seat covers, dark tinted windows, and fuzzy dice dangling from the rearview mirror. The Delta had been lowered so far that it was nearly touching the blue pavement on the handicapped spot where he was parked. Sky was already settled into a corner booth when we arrived. He had let himself go since I had seen him last. He looked out of place against the abstract depiction of a hot sauce packet in his purple silk shirt and gold chain. His white slacks and alligator shoes were barely visible behind the table. He was flanked by two beautiful women who resembled the lost members of Destiny's Child. He didn't get up. He introduced the women as Ember and Naomi before he motioned for me to join him. I probably looked like a cop in my ill-fitting brown suit with wide lapels and shiny blue tie. My sister called my no-budget style thrift store chic. I wished I would have dressed more comfortably, and upon looking at Sky, I was reminded I was long overdue for a shave and a haircut. "What are you eating, Brother Angus?" "I'm buying." "I'm fine with coffee." "I invite you for breakfast and conversation, all you want is fucking coffee?" "I just woke up," I said. "Really not hungry." "That's a damn shame," Sky said. "Taco Bell breakfast is the shit." He sent the woman to the counter to order more food than I'd ever seen anyone order at a Taco Bell. They came back with 4 trays piled high with cheesy toasted breakfast burritos, breakfast crunch wraps, skillet bowls and hash browns, and a gang of Cinnabon delights, orange juice, and a mountain of breakfast salsa. The employees looked at Naomi as she produced a bottle of champagne from her giant purse and began making mimosas. Everyone else helped themselves to the breakfast buffet in front of them. I looked around, but I didn't see any coffee. It seemed to be the only thing not on the table. I was just about to fetch a cup when Naomi slammed a mimosa down in front of me. Sky slid a grande toasted steak burrito, which wasn't my usual Taco Bell order. My usual order consisted of 2 shredded chicken tacos, Doritos, and an iced tea. But I took the steak burrito and enjoyed my mimosa while I waited for Sky to get to the point. Everyone was finishing eating and the champagne was gone, and Sky excused Biggs and the women. The women made their way to the Escalade and vanished. Biggs posted up in a booth within earshot of Sky and I. We were finally getting to the reason I was there. "Been a long time, Brother Angus." "Not long enough. I see you still harbor bad blood." "You fucked my wife." "You broke my nose," he said. "I think we're even." "I told you that was an accident." "You threw a rock at me." "I was aiming for your car," I said. "I think we're even." Actually, I lost my foot. Hold on. All right. "I was aiming for your car," I said. "I just got lucky. Let's cut the bullshit and get to the reason I called you. I think I'd like that. I hear that you're pretty good at finding missing people and shit." "I wouldn't know," I said. "I've mostly dealt with insurance fraud and my personal favorite, cheating spouses." "That's cold, bro." "That's the way it is. Being a private dick ain't as cool as it is on TV. I'd still like to pay you to find something for me. At any given moment, there are as many as 90,000 missing persons in the United States," I said. "Who or what am I looking for?" "I ain't talking about people. Someone took my shit and I want it back." "I don't see why I should care. You're a detective now. That's what you do, right?" "Sounds like a job for the police." "I can't go to the cops," he said. "I'm talking about my crops. Somebody snatched a bunch of my plants." Doesn't sound like something I'd do. Neither of us said anything for a long minute. We just listened to Biggs breathing in the booth behind us. Sky looked disappointed. He started to speak several times before he finally said, "So, you're not going to help me?" I said, "I'm not your huckleberry." "Come on, man, work with me here." "Think about it, Jeff," I said. "I was a happily married man, but now that's a thing of the past. If I remember correctly, I have you to blame for part of that." "That's a real sad story, but this ain't about that, girl," Sky said. "I'm offering to pay you to do your job. Are you going to help me, or are you going to stay hung up on old shit?" I charge $500 a day, plus expenses. "Fucking serious?" "As a heart attack." Done. All right, that was Greenest Color from Damaged Goods, available now on Amazon, wherever fine books are sold. Coming up next is Any Rigs. Make sure you guys go ahead and drop that little present emoji down there, so you can be entered to win 5 books. One of those is Damaged Goods, so drop that shit. All right, Any Rigs, everybody, enjoy.
All right, I'm going to be reading a selection from my book, Chasing Thought. It's not available now. It is coming soon. It will be available in December. Illusions and holograms danced through the air, one indistinguishable from the other. Thus Sarah pressed her lips together and ignored them all, running as fast as she could. Colored lights swirled in front of her, momentarily obscuring her vision. Fucking! Thus Sarah ran into the wall they had concealed. "You're only making things worse for yourself." "I disagree, officer." Woblin's voice came tinny through the hallway, but clear enough for her to hear. It was flat, which was the only thing that had saved it from being crushed or broken, but it still hurt. Once again, she blessed her mixed genetics. She continued down the hallway, forcing herself to move at a slower pace. The gray gods knew what the next set of holograms and illusions might disguise. Damn it, she needed a partner. She ignored the pain that shot through her at the memory of Ripley. His death wouldn't be in vain. A few more steps, and she reached an intersection. Riotous colors showed in every direction, offering her no help. The colors combined over her green skin to make an awful color. Annoying music now played, all the awful songs that children of all species seem to love. Vilsair tapped the jewel connected to her temple. A diagram of the building filtered over her vision, though even that wasn't enough to cover all of Globland's stupid tricks. An exit waited to the left. Right and straight would take her deeper into the building through different sections. Damn it, Globland could be anywhere in the building. She tapped her jewel again, switching to heat sensors. That didn't help. There were dozens of people inside the building, all wondering about what sort of criminal built his lair in a fun park. Without the amusement park, he wouldn't have access to the holograms. And the fun park was what brought all the Cyration here. "Fuck you," Vilsair told the ceiling, knowing Globland would hear her through the speakers. "Should you be using that sort of language, officer? You're great." He knew she was coming. He couldn't stay here, not unless he wanted to get captured. There must be something he had planned, some way to escape. Local police surrounded the amusement park, checking everyone who left. Globland drugged the Cyrashi into giving him these illusions. As long as they stayed psychotropic, the Cyrashi couldn't concentrate enough to get him out. And as soon as they came down from their high, they'd turn on him. That was worse than getting captured by her or the local police. And I'm going to go ahead and pause there. So next up is B.T. Martinson again.
Okay, so I will be reading the first story in our anthology Golden Bridges, which is out, and it's also going to be in the giveaway. This one is a little bit of a sci-fi one. So, Glent Kitten yawned hard enough to squeeze out a few tears, but he couldn't wipe them away due to his spacesuit. He was already suited up and working on the new Venusian bridge for about an hour. The rest of the discs were still asleep except for the construction crews for the new bridge and the new disc. Up on the golden and sulfuric clouds of Venus floated two discs that were both 2 miles in diameter. One held a metropolis populated with pink farms, residential area, and the market area for general goods. The outer ring held landing strips for aircrafts, warehouses for construction, and buildings for the facilities. The domes of the city were covered in solar panels. Up here, the sun shined 24/7. Well, all the time because the days are so much longer. The dome provided an artificial light that replicated the sun rises and sunsets according to Earth time. He glanced up. The air and water tanks for the disc that were rested in the belly of the disc were covered up already. The new disc was a tribute to Earth, a sort of theme park, but with trees and even a replica of the top of Everest. The mountain rose a good 200 feet before the man-made steel scaffolding underneath finished the other 200 feet. A few cabins were already under construction around the lower levels of the mountain range. They would add the artificial snow once the mountain was finished. The dome was ready, so those working inside could work without spacesuits. Glenn envied those crews. It was much safer work. Glenn blinked a few times to clear his eyes. He turned on the speaker in his spacesuit and listened to some music. He leaned over the steel beam, lit his air torch, and continued welding the braces together. It wasn't a bad gig. After high school, he didn't want to end up in tons of debt by going to college. He didn't have a problem working with his hands, so for a few months of training, he learned welding. After a few more months of space training, he went to Venus. It paid well enough, but it was long hours. He had to buy his own tools, though. The air torch to burn on Venus cost him $2,000 alone. Fancy tech was nice, but it cost a ton of money. To him, anyway. He had that torch tethered to his wrist at all times. If he dropped it, it would be a molten piece of metal on Venus's surface for the rest of the time. There was no getting it back if it fell. He was still paying off his spacesuit. He just prayed it didn't break or tear before he needed a new one. It was long hours too. Yesterday was another 16-hour day because the boss said something about a deadline. It wasn't their fault. The iron from the asteroid belt was delayed, which put them behind schedule. Mining from asteroids was difficult. Glenn hated the thought of crawling into a mine, let alone a mine on a hunk of rock lost in the solar system. And by the time you're done mining, you have no idea how far away from home you are because asteroids go their own way in space. Then there were the storms on Venus. The winds reached 280 plus miles an hour in some places. In the domes, all he felt was a slight tilt, but working outside of the protection of the disc and domes, that was suicidal. But it's what the boss wanted. It didn't matter that it was another night of only a few hours of sleep. As long as they got their toys in space to play with, they were happy, and they wouldn't be happy a moment before. Glenn thought space exploration would be a lot more exciting and less of the mundane business that was conducted on Earth. He cut the torch off and slid the shaded part of his visor up to inspect the dome. It looked good. He pushed himself up and walked along the beam. It bounced and wavered as he placed one foot in front of the other. With nothing to hold up the other end, they weren't that steady to walk on. They didn't have a lot more to do before it was finished. Another crew was working on the bridge from the other direction, and they had another 100 feet for 5 more beams before they connected the bare skeletal structure of the bridge. They still had plates to lay, air support tanks to install for stability, and a way to seal from the sulfuric clouds. Just another 5 beams to secure before it was stable. Sometimes he wished the gravity was less here, but it was comparable to Earth's. There was a difference, but not much. At least he could do more exercises. He always wanted to do 100 push-ups in one go. A hovercraft flew out to meet him at the end of the next beam. He knelt down, rested the brace over the joint, and began securing the bolts. He fumbled one of the bolts, and it bounced off the beam. He instinctively reached for it and slipped. The bolt plummeted through the golden clouds. He caught himself, his music cut off, and an electronic voice cut through. "Kitten, you okay?" It was the crew from the hovercraft. "I'm fine. I lost a bolt." "Well, don't try to catch them if they fall," the voice responded. "I know that," Glenn responded. "I'm tired, not stupid." A wind tugged at Glenn. The voice came back on. "Glenn, get back to the disc. A storm is coming." And I'll leave it there, and I will introduce Molly Daniel.
Hello, I'm author Molly Daniels, and I'll be reading an excerpt from my Rusty Bridge story. I had an unusual experience with this. I actually interviewed the bridge, and it took a strange turn. But just to kind of catch you up, this is when he is part of the interview. "What's the most exciting moment you can remember?" Rusty thought for a moment. "I've witnessed birth in the form of eggs hatching and baby fawns springing up. Was when the kids misjudged the slope of the bank one winter and their sled tipped over. One kid broke through the thin ice while the other nearly had the wind knocked out of him when he hit the sapling. Thankfully, a friend was with him and he was able to get the wet kid out and back to the house before hypothermia set in. So they're both okay?" "Oh yes, didn't see them for a few days, but they came down and built a snowman right over there. Do you ever wish you were somewhere else, like a city or near a neighborhood? My cousin's a drawbridge down in Florida, and he's downright exhausted. He has to be rebuilt every couple of years, and the highlight of his day is at night, when everything is quiet, and the manatees, dolphins, and other marine life play around his pylons. The reporter blinked. "You have a cousin? How is that possible?" "We were built by the same company. Every once in a while, a bird will land on me and bring me news of how Lifty's doing. Don't you talk to your family now and then?" "Well, yes, I guess I just never thought of a bridge having a family. And you look at me and see a non-sentient being, but I provide a service and don't complain, unless I'm about to break. When I start to moan, inspectors had better arrive as soon as possible in order to prevent a tragedy. Sky, my other cousin, was hurt several years ago when the ship ran into him. He felt terrible about the tragedy, but there wasn't anything he could do about it. We keep telling him to put it behind him, but that's the thing about steel and concrete. The memory never dies." "I never thought about it that way." Kelsey put down her pen. "You're telling me Bridget memories and families?" Rusty sighed. "I'm old, I'm tired, and if what the kids say is true, one day a developer's gonna turn this area into a pond and I'll be replaced by a dock. It's time to take my place in the local history books." And now I'd like to bring up Miss N.E. Rakes, who will also be reading something.
Hey, just as a reminder, if you haven't commented yet, please do so. If you have any questions, if you have anything you want to tell us, let us know. We'd like to engage with people. Again, as a reminder, if you want to be entered into the giveaway to get 5 free ebooks, please either say the word present or give us a present emoji. We've got a few people already, but let us know if you want to be entered. All right, I'm going to be reading another chapter from my upcoming book, Chasing Thought. Madrigan had never experienced silence. He wondered sometimes what it was like. 5 years ago, when he was nearly free, he drank and took drugs in an attempt to summon it. None of those things helped. They only made the world noisier. In the end, the only choice was to learn to control his powers. There was still no silence, but Madrigan could muffle the thoughts around him. No matter how hard he practiced, there were certain thoughts that he couldn't keep out, couldn't ignore. Fear amplified mental voices better than anything, though anger and love made thoughts louder too. Over his life, Madrigan had learned to avoid certain places: hospitals, graveyards, police stations, prisons, wedding chapels, and sporting facilities. Ironically, the last was usually the worst, as most sentient species were still invested in their team of choice. Even when he avoided problematic places, which he couldn't always do, Eventually, the thoughts and emotions of those around him caught up to him, like now. Screams filled the air, but they weren't as loud as the screams in Madrigal's head. He kept back, letting his associates take points. Useless, Shorven said as he rushed past Madrigal on short, stubby legs. Madrigal's hands clenched into fists. He could feel Shorven's mind, such a weak, unfocused thing. One little push in the right place could kill him or send him into a permanent vegetative state. Perhaps even better, a few little tweaks could alter his personality. Madrigal would love to have a slave, someone who fawned over him and took his whims as law. Focus! Geffin's grip on his arm shook Madrigal out of his fantasy. He turned to see his best friend's face, inches from his own, strained and covered in a thin layer of sweat. Sorry. Madrigal looked down the hallway. He didn't need a visual, but it helped. 4 security guards huddled behind what little cover they could find. A desk turned on its side, a chair, and one another. They popped out just long enough to shoot their blasters, making Geffin's crew scatter. Other than Geffen and Madrigal, who stood at the far end of the hallway behind the door, no one had anywhere to hide. If Madrigal didn't hurry, many people would die. The security guards would die. He and Geffen would ensure that. Madrigal wished more people on this terrible world would die, but they didn't have time for a bloodbath. Focus, else half of Geffin's crew might also die. He wouldn't mourn for Shorven. If the Chalky wasn't so damn useful, Madrigal would have already orchestrated his death. Shorven being useful made no difference. Madrigal couldn't kill him, not by any means. Even if the situation looked completely natural, Geffen would know. He'd look at Madrigal with disappointment. The second guard behind the desk had stars on the left breast of his uniform, an officer. Madrigal dropped into his mind. The first few moments were the worst. The officer's fears buffeted him like strong waves in the ocean, ready to drown him at any moment. The crew had disabled communication down here, so the guards couldn't call for help. Possibilities flashed through the officer's mind, one on the heels of the previous, as he tried to think of a way for himself and the other. The fear spiked in a wave greater than any other, so vast it threatened to encompass Madrigal. He angled himself and shot through it. He played with stronger minds than this, and he knew what to do. Are we having technical difficulties? No? Okay. Sorry about that. Beyond the emotions waited the brain's sorting center. Human minds were easier to read than most. The consciousness couldn't sort through all the files waiting here, but Madrigal could. It was as easy as looking up information on his field. He sat in the chair in the center of a vast room. Books, files, and consoles surrounded him, going up and down as far as he could see. A lifetime of knowledge and experience waited here, most of the older parts of it buried under recent things. Access security code for the basement of the Treasury building, Madrigal said. The books, files, and consoles around him spanned and moved, looking for what he needed. They stopped after a second, a console pushing forward before him. A series of numbers and letters showed on it, as well as a note and a memory. Madrigal stood from the chair. The mind rushed past him in reverse. The sky showed an image of the outside world, which included the dead bodies of 2 of the other security guards. This man knew he was going to die. A sun hung dim over the turbulent ocean, clouds trying to obscure it. The sun. He gave it a tug, and it came free from the sky. The man wailed as he died. Madrigal was expelled from the mind in time to see the last security guard turn to stare in shock as his superior fellow were dead, seemingly without cause. His moment of distraction left him vulnerable. 3 of Geffin's crew shot him, and he too died. And I'm going to pause there. So again, both of those readings were from Chasing Thought, which will be available soon. Next up, we've got Molly Daniels again. Assuming she's ready. So we'll let her get started. Or do you want to read from J. Travis?
Kenzie.
Oh, sorry, Kenzie Michaels is next.
Molly Daniels, but I'm also masquerading as the books that you can possibly win tonight is My Catered Romance. That came out 10 years ago. Well, they individually came out 10 years ago, and then I put them all into one book last year? 2 years ago? Yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna read an excerpt from Cross Reunion, which is about the 25th high school reunion, where, sorry, I forgot my character's name briefly. Natalie meets up with Brian, who she had a huge crush on, reconnected at the reunion party. Interesting how you and Brian both have Subway bags. Why didn't you just order from the club like others? Lisa linked her arm with Natalie. Natalie shrugged. Maybe he was in the mood for something different for a change. I mean, he liked to eat the same place all the time. But he didn't stop anywhere. Brent and I followed him here, so that begs the question, where did he get it? Lisa's voice dropped to a murmur. Come on, Nat, you can tell me. Okay, we discussed it last night while we were dancing, Natalie lied. I mentioned Subway and he asked me to get him something. End of story. Lisa made a disappointed sound. That's all? No juicy details? What's there to tell? Lisa, I'm going back to Idaho tomorrow. Why on earth would I hook up with someone I won't see again for another 10 years? Natalie struggled to keep her face neutral. Ha ha, you're turning pink, Natalie. You always were a lousy liar. Tell me. Lisa dropped her arm and faced her. You didn't have sex with a vibrator. You slept with Brian. Oh my God. She clapped her hands over her mouth. What were you thinking? Natalie looked around and motioned Lisa closer. I was curious. He kept looking down my shirt. He kissed me and it was so good. Then I thought, please. He stopped to ignore me until I get on that plane and we return to our lives. He, what? Lisa blinked. So that's why he's sitting across from you? You blackmailed him to be with you today? I wouldn't call it blackmail. He said he wanted to no strings attached. I told him I wasn't a call girl, and if he wanted to sleep with me, then he better not act like a freaking stranger for me today. Natalie twisted her hand together. He told me a little bit more about what happened at the tent, and I'm determined to show him what's next. Lisa took a deep breath. Are you still in love with him? Natalie's eyes filled with tears. I thought I heard him from my brain. And then he reached out and hugged me, which is all I wanted in high school. You know that scene from Cheers where Sam and Diane are arguing and he reaches out and kisses her and they end up in bed? Lisa nodded. I hoped that would happen between us one day during one of our many arguments. Natalie swallowed and brushed away her tears. But he ended up marrying Gracie. And when he kissed me in the bar, I made up my mind if he wanted to sleep with me, then I wasn't going to stop him. She tried to smile. I'm stupid, huh? Lisa pulled her into a hug. But can you just let him go? She wrote circles on her friend's back. I have no choice, do I? He's got my cell number, and I'm certainly not going to delete his unless he doesn't call me back. I have to get this right. I have to be careful about how and when I speak to him. You don't want to come off as too clingy or too independent. Right. Let's go make a little organized. And next up is J. Travis Grundy.
Take Bridges with you. Oh, you're reading from. Okay.
Hi, it's me again. You might remember me in such places as earlier tonight or Twitter. This time, I'm actually going to be reading from Bridges. This is a great collection. I want to give a shout out to Stephen J. Golds, who couldn't be here with us because he's in Japan and we're in Indiana. So you tell me who lucky in this. So anyway, Stephen couldn't be here tonight. I'm not going to read his work because I won't do it justice, but I just want to give a big shout out to Stephen J. Golds for being the only non-Vincentian in this collection. Stephen, I love you, man. You're fantastic. Thank you for being a part of this book. I love your story. I hope everyone will check it out. While I'm up here filling time, I would also like to take this opportunity to promote Rouge Noir. Nancy and Amy Riggs and I have put a lot of time and effort into making this magazine successful, and we have some of the best writers in the world. So get your Rouge Noir t-shirt, get your Rouge Noir magazine. But whatever you do, don't miss it, because this thing was, Rouge Noir was doing even better than I expected, and I knew it was going to be cool. All right, I'm rambling. So before I rambled on too far, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to read from Bridges, And the story I'm going to be reading is my vigilante story, The Night James McMurtry Came to Town. This is targeted to James McMurtry fans and fans of superhero films. I've never really written a vigilante thing before, so this is my first outing. This vigilante doesn't even have a name yet. So if you have any ideas for this character after you hear this piece, drop it in the comments or hit me up on Twitter or Facebook. Let me know what you think. Right now, I'm going to start with The Night James McMurtry Came to Town. I never understood Batman. Instead of becoming a cop or a private investigator, he put on spandex and swung around rooftops with underage boys. It never seemed that he could have just donated money to the GPD or the city to provide better police protection. I assumed it was because Bruce Wayne had more psychological problems than the entire menagerie of 100-acre wood. He was a hypocrite who beat the shit out of people who he deemed criminals. Meanwhile, he was a criminal himself by being a vigilante. The lines got even more blurred as time went on. He battleated mutilated freaks with their own severe mental issues. Even when he rubbed cops the wrong way, he always got away, and his name was always cleared. It made it clear to me that as a young man, that rich eccentric weirdos could do whatever they want to do and get away with it. Don't we know that's true? This all came rushing back to me as I stood on Howard Phillips Memorial Bridge. I was blown up from fighting when I was down to the last bad guy, and possibly killed the fat guy. I found them behind the Seal Club. 4 good old boys were kicking and stomping at something on the ground, while this guy kept hold of a woman, forcing her to watch. As I got closer, I could see the object on the ground was a person. He was a dark-skinned man wearing blue jeans and a white t-shirt, or a t-shirt that had once been white. It had turned shades of pink and red from the blood all over it. The rednecks were yelling racial slurs, telling the man on the ground to go back to where he came from and that other hateful bullshit. My attention was drawn by the woman screaming, "Stop! You're hurting him! Stop it!" She was an enchanting raven-haired lady with bronze skin. Her accent was Latina, maybe Mexican, Guatemalan, or Honduran. I was getting close enough to make out the details when the guy's hand shot upward and slapped her full on the face. Her head rocked to the side. I heard the crack from across the street. The men each looked like they could have been brothers or cousins, or both. They were each decked out like Gunsmoke for a Saturday night. They wore boots, jeans, Western-style button-down shirts, and big old belt buckles. Some had cowboy hats. They were like parodies of themselves, farm boys pretending to be cowboys. They were really tough in their 4 to 5-on-1 situation, but only 2 of them looked like they were a threat by themselves. I needed to take out the one with the baseball bat and the fat guy first. The others would inevitably give up and run away. I had seen it more than once, and I never let them walk away. The woman's eye was swollen from the blow, and the other was fixed on me as I approached. Her face was awash of fear. She was terrified by the farm boys, but when she saw me, it was clear that she was afraid of me too. I was also dressed for a night on the town, in my black battle dress uniform, Kevlar vest. I wore combat boots, indestructible Nomex gloves, and a black balaclava, with a tactical paintball mask over it. The mask was an off shade of white, and it was designed to look like a skull. It was the mask that had been all over the cover of the Daily Voice and the local news. The headline said shit like, "People's police seeking suspect in a murder investigation," and "Vigilante strikes in the heartland." The papers never got it right. The news was a joke. They were more worried about being the first to report than they were about facts and useful information. The Metro Police were equally as inept. The guy holding the girl was the first one to notice me. He looked confused, but he let go of the girl and pointed me out to the others. They stopped beating the man on the ground, turned their attention to me. They formed a semicircle around me as I approached. The fat guy said, "What the fuck is this shit?" I said nothing. I kicked the guy closest to me in the groin with a satisfying crunch. He dropped to his knees and fell forward, face first into his Stetson. The other guys looked around at each other as if waiting to see who would retaliate first. The one with the bat and the guy who could have been his twin who charged with, We'll try that again. The one with the bat and the guy who could have been his twin charged first. The man with the bat swung wildly, leaving himself open for me to punch him in the throat. My gloves were sturdy enough to punch through a windshield, so the man's windpipe didn't offer much resistance. He hit the ground, gasping for air, and my attention turned towards the guy on my left. He never got a chance, because I spun around and snapped to attention before. What? He never got the chance because I swung and snapped to attention before I swung my upper body from the center of my back, bringing the hard plastic of the skull mask into his face. His nose exploded and he dropped to the ground next to the gasping man. He no longer had a baseball bat. The man holding the girl and the other scrawny guy took off like their asses were on fire. They both turned and ran towards the river on the Memorial Bridge. I let them go. I wanted a big guy, and I figured the others would be easy enough to find when I was finished with him. The fat guy looked like Santa Claus in a cowboy costume. He probably thought he looked like Charlie Daniels. He probably thought he was really tough, too. When he sloped forward, I kicked his right knee back and hit him with an uppercut to the jaw as he rocked forward. He grabbed my vest and kept himself upright and tried to get a good hold on me in some half-assed attempt to fight back. I hit him again, this time in the face with the gloves. His fat features made it hard to break bones, but he was down. He whined like a jackass while I collected the bat near where he had collapsed on the ground. I turned with a woman who was attending to the man on the ground. "Get out of here and call 911. She didn't move. The man in her arms wasn't moving either. He was still breathing, which was more than the fat guy would be able to say when I was finished with him. All right, that is just a little snippet of what happens in my vigilante story in Bridges. And if you want to know what happens to the guy on the bridge and the fat guy, pick it up, available now, or drop that person emoji right there in that chat and win a free e-copy along with 4 other books. That's five, count them, 5 ebooks, for free. All you gotta do is drop that person emoji. Coming up next, my buddy BT Martinson.
Knock it over.
We're good. Okay, so I'll be reading another one from Bridges. So I have 3 stories on this. I will be reading one called Rotten Bridges. It's one with another character called Ben that I have. Ben came in our previous anthology, because we have 4 now. Ben started in.
What are those 4 anthologies, Ben?
There's Hotel Stories, Whispers. It's a good question. Hotel Stories, Whispers, Bad Decisions, and then 4th is Bridges. So Ben came in Bad Decisions. He is a half human, half demon child, and he's being raised in a monastery. So I thought I would read a little bit of him because I love Ben. He's a character I need more ideas what to do with. And he fits into Bridges because he's kind of looking for that bridge to connect him with anyone else, pretty much. So, Ben stretched along with the tolling of the morning bells in the beautiful Doon monastery and kicked his sturdy blanket off the bed of hay and onto a wooden floorboards where it landed in a cloud of dust. He heard a rustling and a squeak. "Evie? Is that you?" A rat scurried out from under the blanket. "Good morning, Evie." He grabbed the tray from last night's dinner, which still held some crumbs, and he gave it to Evie. "I'll be back with more breakfast." He scratched Evie on the head. He knew he needed to be careful around the rats. Father Olson told him that they carried diseases. It was only that the rats weren't afraid of him, people were. He didn't understand why. He didn't understand why there was nobody else like him. Nobody else had ribbed scales like he did, a tail, or ram horns, which he broke one. He spied on a cow during prayer every morning, and all he saw were humans. Sometimes an elf or a dwarf came through. They were rare. The elves were pretty and the dwarfs talked fun. He spent hours trying to replicate their funny accents. Ibby thought he did a good impersonation of the dwarves. Well, he stuck around for the good. Ben brushed any stray hay off of himself and donned the second rope to help find the fall of chill. He grabbed a small potato sack and headed down the monastery. Immediately outside his door was a stack of boxes that he had to squeeze behind. He made his way out of the storage room. Then it was down the hall. It was still dim, but that was only because the sun hadn't cleared the valley mountains yet. On the first floor, he found the kitchen. It was Genji's turn in the kitchen. Genji was a middle-aged monk who didn't trust Ben. So Ben knocked when he entered. Genji jumped from the kneading of a massive amount of dough. "Good morning, young Ben." He motioned toward the door. Motioned toward the open face oven with several mounds of bread cooking in it. "The first batch will be done soon. Go fetch water while you wait." Ben picked up a pair of buckets and meandered out a couple of doors to the well outside. He attached the buckets one at a time to lower them down into the well and hoist them back up. Then used a rod to balance one bucket on each end and placed it over his shoulders. He could smell the bread before he'd gotten in the door. Ben placed the buckets by Genji. He didn't like it when Ben brought the bucket, so he was as careful as he could be. Ben mumbled, "Here you go, brother." Then ran around to collect a loaf of bread. He gave a sidelong glance at Genji to see if he was watching. He was. So Ben only took one loaf. Maybe he would have to be satisfied with less today. Ben also grabbed some fruits and cheeses before going back to his room. Once he was back in his room, he broke off a piece of bread and knocked it on the wooden floorboards. Ibby and a few others like Han and Clyde joined him. Ben broke off half for him and broke the other half into several pieces for his friends. He ate breakfast with his friends. "Would you like to come to morning prayer with me?" He held out a hand and Ibby scurried up the sleeve of his robe. Ibby hid in the back of Ben's neck where there's more room in his robes around his neck. Ben ran down to the gathering hall. He stopped short of the halls from the doorway. He would watch the monks and visitors of the monastery filing into the prayer hall. Someone loudly cleared their throat behind him. Ben turned around to find an angry monk with arms crossed over his chest and a frown on his face. "Brother Badri, I wasn't doing anything other than watching, I swear." "It's not safe for you here," Badri said, and grabbed him by the shoulder. He guided him down the empty corridor. "But I want to watch the morning prayer. I'll watch it from upstairs since it's crowded," Ben said. Badri was shaking his head. "If anything happens to you, Father Al-Sun will blame all of us. We all know what happened the last time someone spotted you." "What am I supposed to do?" Ben asked. It wasn't fair that he had to spend his life cooped up. It wasn't his fault he was born different. Badri sighed. "I don't know, you can work on laundry while people are in the prayer hall. It'll keep you out of sight." "But it's not my turn to do laundry," Ben protested. "Doing rewards those who work hard and do good deeds to redeem themselves," Badri said. "But what did I do wrong that I need redeeming?" Ben asked. Badri threw open the door to the laundry room. "I don't know. Maybe you're paying for your father's sins. It's a good probability. But," Ben started, It's better that you work than a traveler or townfolk find out that we are hiding a demon in the monastery. I would hate to tell them." Why did he have to pay for his father's sins? He didn't even know his father. He never agreed to any of this. Why did Duan find someone else to make the world right? What did Duan expect from him? He was just a kid. In the laundry room, Ben swatted up at the smell of sweat coming from the ropes. He pinched his nose and worked the water pump to fill the basins with water. He added some soaps and oils which helped with the smell. Then he began tossing the robes into the tubs. He pulled his robe up over his nose, tied the sleeves up, and began scrubbing the dirty robes and blankets against the washing board. Ibby stuck his head out every now and then to squeak his approval. "Thanks, Ibby." Ben lost track of time. He had half a tub washed and rinsed by the time the door swung back open. Badri swept in and evaluated his work. He sighed. "You're too slow at this. Go back to your room. I'll finish this." "I don't see why I had to do this in the first place." "To keep you out of trouble," Doctor said. Ben studied for a moment. "I don't cause trouble. I was trying. Trouble follows you around. for Dijin. I understand it's in your nature, Bobby cut him off. It's not my fault. I was trying to help. Go, Bobby said and pointed out the door. Ben balled his fist. He wanted to help Bobby. Ben tried to help these people. It wasn't his fault. Sorry, Ben tried to help those people. It wasn't his fault. He didn't do anything to make that man attack him. Why was Ben responsible for the evil in others? Father Olson said, I know what he said. I'm doing my best to keep you alive and out of trouble, Bobby said. This is what's best for you. Do and rewards those who are obedient. Ben gritted his teeth. It wasn't fair. Ben was obedient. Father Olson said that nobody, not even the Dijins, are born with hate in their hearts. Hate is something that is taught. With that thought, Ben let out a deep breath and left through the door. He marched out the door and up to his room. Anger welled up inside of him. It was hot. It felt like he needed to release, or it might just burn him. He threw the door shut, and the rat squeaked and scurried away. I'm sorry, Ben said, and reached for the rats. Ibby scrambled and jumped down from him. Ibby! Ben reached for him, but the rat ran in between some cracks in the floor. Come back! Then he felt cold and alone. Maybe he was troubled, but he tried so hard it wasn't fair. He felt that anger rising again. Father Olson's teachings came back to him about breathing and control. Ben sat cross-legged on the floor. He worked through an exercise, and the anger died down. All there was this moment. All that he could control was himself. A small voice in him said that was a lie. That try as he might, it will never be enough for Bobby and the others. He pushed that voice aside and continued his exercises. Sometime later, there was a knock at his door. He jumped at the intruding sound, and in walked Genji. The middle-aged monk gave a slight bow. I am supposed to take you with me to collect honey. Ben saw that he had a heavy cloak with him. I am fine if you wish to stay here. He looked around the small room. For a moment, Ben hesitated. Last time he left the temple, people attacked him. He trembled at the memory, and his broken horn ached. The temple was safe, but the outside world held many dangers. He wouldn't be alone. Genji would be with him. I would love to go, Ben said. He jumped over to Genji, who held on the heavy cloak. Genji helped Ben don the cloak and made sure the hood was pulled up. Ben had to tilt his head nearly all the way back till he was looking down his nose to see what was in front of him. And I'll leave it there as to whether or not Ben finds anybody else like him, what happens on his adventure as he goes out. I will introduce Mackenzie Michaels next to read more from her book, Kid Romance.
So before I get started, I have a funny story to tell you. Back in 2008, I was invited to join this lovely little group of ours. And when I met J. Travis Sherman, he announced they were going to have a do an anthology called Off the Clock. Well, my brain got in gear, and I wrote a couple of chapters. And then for the next week, I came in and said, "Hey, I've got an idea. We're going to set it at the country club." And Travis looked at me and goes, "We were thinking more say chicken check off the clock." But read the second story here called All She Ever Wanted. She said, "Hey, I want to know about that Brian Bellinger story." So I started writing class reunion. Well, the main character from Off the Clock jumped in, and my standalone and my sequel came in trilogy. So this is the prologue to Off the Clock, which thank you for letting me steal the title.
No problem, man.
This is the prologue to it. Across the crowded reception hall, he watched his young assistant as she moved easily among the guests, gathering empty glasses, scattered napkins, and overflowing ashtrays. He'd hired her He'd hired her 2 weeks earlier and had become unsure of asking her to be his hostess. But his date had canceled on him, and his assistant had been taking the message. She was a quiet person who appeared every morning on time, did her work efficiently, anticipated his moods, and disappeared after hours. He wasn't exactly sure how she'd handle a social situation, but if she was nervous, she hid it well. "Austin, where did you find her?" His best friend Ryan clapped him on the back. "She's fantastic, man. Nothing like Leslie. She answered my ad in the paper. She's my office assistant." Austin Harmon took a sip of his drink and followed her with his eyes as she paused to speak to an elderly couple. "You lucky dog. You banging her or she taken?" Ryan adjusted his straight tie.